Good afternoon. Welcome to this web concert. I'm Benjamin Whitcomb. I'd like to thank Jill and the Fort Club and Hans and Aurora with Young Auditorium for helping to make this possible. I imagine that a lot of the people who are watching this have seen me play before. If you don't recognize me, it's because I've never had so much hair. No, but if you have been to my concerts before, you know I like to talk about the music. And I think if anything, I'll do a little bit more than usual now. There is no fourth wall. And I think it's fairly safe to assume that the repertoire that I'll be playing today is not as familiar to most people. So sometimes just having a little additional context can give you something to listen for and help you get more out of the performance. So the repertoire for unaccompanied cello is actually fairly large, not especially well known with the exception of the 6 suites for unaccompanied cello by J.S. Bach. Thank goodness for these Bach suites. It's very hard to overstate their significance in the cello repertoire. There are 6 of them. They were written around 1720 in Courant. And each of the 6 is in 6 movements, and they all have the same pattern. They all go prelude. There's not going to be a quiz, but still, just to go over this a couple times, there's going to go prelude, allemande, courant, sarabande, and then a variable pair of dances, and then a gigue. And it's maybe easier to think of that in terms of a tour of Europe. So the prelude is not any particular country. And then we go Germany, France, Spain, and then of course this one varies, and then England. And the one thing that they all have in common is being in the same key. So for example, the first suite is in G major, so all of them are in G major. And in fact, that's why we have the prelude to start the suite. Is the whole point of the prelude is to establish the key, get the key in our minds for what's to come in the succeeding 5 dances. So I have a CD actually of suites 1, 3, and 5, actually which was recorded. The recording engineer was Roger Yin, who also works at UW-Whitewater and lives in Fort Atkinson. And so I figured today I'd play you some selections from suites 2, 4, and 6, the other 3. Now we could actually make the whole concert out of just playing the 6 unaccompanied suites for cello, which is a thing. People play them as a cycle is what it's called. And I like to do it too. I've done it before. In fact, I have working on plans with Beth Ann Hanslick of the art department to do all 6 while she paints whatever comes to her mind while I play them, which hopefully will happen this fall. So stay tuned for that. But at any rate, this is just almost obligatory to start with some unaccompanied Bach. So I'm going to start by playing the pair of dances. These are the minuets from suite number 2 in D minor. And something to listen for in this, I think it works very well as a standalone piece and as a piece for unaccompanied cello. I'm kind of playing a duet on one instrument, so I'm providing my own bass line. So you'll want to listen for this bass line that goes. Something along those lines is going on while I'm playing a melody over that. So here are the minuets 1 and 2 from Johann Sebastian Bach's Suite number 2 in D minor. So that's minuet 1, minuet 2, and then back to minuet 1 is the tradition. Now to contrast with that, I picked the Courant, so this is the French dance from Suite number 4 in E flat major. It's, well, it's quite a bit different. The word Courant is French for running, and we'll see how you think it compares to the one from the D minor suite. Here's the Courant from Suite number 4. So from there, we'll move to suite number 6. Now, something you should know about suite 6, it's a little bit different. Suite 5 and 6 are a little bit different from the other 4. Suite 5 was written for cello, what's called scordatura, which means you tune to a non-standard tuning. And suite 6 was actually written for a 5-string instrument. So to play something written for 5 strings on 4 strings kind of puts it in the virtuoso category, a string short of a 5-string instrument, you could say. At any rate, this is the pair of gavottes from the D major suite, suite number 6. All right, well, Bach was certainly not the only composer from the Baroque period, which is the period from 1600 to 1750, to write for solo cello, unaccompanied cello, or a very similar instrument called viola da gamba. So let's turn next to another one of these pieces, just for comparison's sake. So George Telamon wrote a piece just called Sonata in D major, which was originally for viola da gamba. And it's similar but different. I hope you'll have fun comparing it to the Bach. And we'll just hear the prelude from this piece. It was written in 1728 up the road in Hamburg, Germany. All right, along the same idea of exploring some more Baroque music for unaccompanied cello, let's move to Italy. This is Domenico Gabriela, who was a composer, but more than anything, a virtuoso cellist. So he mostly wrote cello music. He wrote a set of 7, they're basically, think of them as very free pieces like fantasias, but they're called ricercares. And this was in 1685 in the Bologna region. This is going to be, I'll just play you Ricercar number 7, the last of the set of 7. All right, let's do one more Baroque piece. Let's go up to France, Paris, France, for a movement of a work by a man named Bois Moitié. And he wrote, it's a piece called Concerto, but really it's a collection of movements, a collection of dances along the lines of a suite for alternately either cello or viol or viola da gamba. Of course, I'm going to play it on cello. And this particular movement is called Paysanne, which, if anything, might remind you of the gavotte from the Sixth Suite by Bach that we heard a little bit ago. So next, let's just hear a couple of examples of unaccompanied cello music from the 20th century, just to see how different the writing is 300 years later. Paul Hindemith was another German composer who wrote a fair amount for cello, including one of his Opus 25 works, which was just called Sonata for Unaccompanied Cello, and it's in 5 movements. And this is the second movement, very quirky, short little second movement of this 5-movement sonata, but it's really more like a suite. Told you it was quirky. So that was written in 1922 in Frankfurt, Germany. And now let's cross the channel to England and go a few decades later. Benjamin Britten was another composer who was fond of writing for the cello in general, and also, like several other composers, wrote 20th century composers would often write 3 things at a time for cello or for unaccompanied cello. I think the number 6, trying to copy Bach's 6 suites was just a few too many, so they'd do 3. At any rate, Benjamin Britten wrote 3 suites for unaccompanied cello, and this first one was written in 1965. And this is just the short first movement of it. Simply, it's kind of an introductory movement called Canto Primo. So you certainly wouldn't ever confuse either of those 2 pieces with the various works from the Baroque period. And again, as with the Baroque period, far from, it was just a very short sampling. So if you like either of those, please go and explore further, and you'll have a hard time running out of additional works for unaccompanied cello to check out and explore. And they're all very, very unique, very fun. Now, this next piece is technically also from the same category of unaccompanied works from the 20th century, but it's kind of in a category by itself. Stylistically, it's a piece called Giulio by Mark Summer, who was one of the founding members of the Turtle Island String Quartet and played with it for 30 years, 1985 to 2015. And in 1988, he wrote this short work for unaccompanied cello, which has ever since been an absolute staple of the repertoire and a favorite among cellists. So I did, if you happen to have caught my Music Mondays performance last Monday, this is the one piece that I'm repeating from that concert to this, but it's just popular enough, I think it's worth playing twice. So here's Giulio by Mark Summer. All right, for the second half, just rather than playing all unaccompanied music, which isn't everybody's cup of tea, I thought I'd try first some duets. I have a looper pedal and an electric cello. I much prefer this cello, so rather than make people sit through laying down the one track and then playing the other over it, just went ahead and did the cello 2 part for everything already. So I'll just be playing the cello 1 part for each of these duets. So we'll start with a pair of cannons. So like row, row, row your boat, like a round. Those are always fun and have been popular for centuries. The first one is by Domenico Gabriela, whom we heard earlier. This was actually a canon published with the set of the 7 Reacher cars, and it's in D major. All right, and then the other canon, I promised 2 of them. This is by George Telamon, another composer that we heard earlier, and he wrote actually quite a number of canons in sets that he called canonic sonatas. Canonic sonatas. And he wrote them in about 1738 and 9. And they're quite popular for a variety of instruments. And I'm just going to play you the first movement of the canonic sonata in E minor. All right, next I'll play another, it's a duet, but it's not a canon. This is just kind of in an attempt to play some of the pieces on cello that make people say, oh, I love the cello. So it's known as air on the G string, but it's the movement air from Bach's Orchestral Suite No. 3, which is often pulled out and done as a standalone thing, whether at weddings or special occasions, or at online concerts. Okay, let's jump back for the last duet to the 20th century. This is a composer named Halsey Stevens, who wrote this in 1953. He was at UCLA at the time. And he writes a lot of fun music. It's fun to play. I hope it's fun to listen to as well. And it's very kind of rhythmically humorous and offbeat. So hopefully you'll like, this is 3 of the 5 duets in just a set of pieces called 5 Duets for Cello. All right, so that's the end of the cello duet portion, but in playing along with recordings, if I also were to be joined by a virtual pianist, I think another one of the most famous pieces, and for good reason, for cello is a piece called The Swan, which is part of the Carnival of the Animals, written by Camille Saint-Saëns in 1886, actually just in a village in Austria after kind of an unsuccessful tour. So it was just, to him, just a fun thing with his friends, kind of like Schubert with his Trout Quintet. I don't know that he ever thought it was going to become as famous as it has, but we're sure glad he wrote it. This is The Swan from Carnival of the Animals. What did I do next? All right, one more duet for cello and virtual piano. This is a piece called Sicilienne by Gabriel Fauré, who was a contemporary of and friend of Saint-Saëns. And he wrote it in Paris in 1893. It was originally supposed to have been part of some of his stage music, but then he just made it into a piece for cello and piano, and it's quite popular, and it's just called Sicilienne. All right, as an ender, as a finale, hopefully a grand finale, you'll be the judge. Let's do a piece called Ave Maria by Gounod, but it was written as a melody over the already very famous and popular well-tempered clavier first prelude in C major by Johann Sebastian Bach. So it's a piece layered over another piece. Hopefully you'll recognize both. This is the Ave Maria by Gounod. Now I'll just add at the end, the pianist that you heard on that last piece, the Ave Maria Gounod, playing well-tempered clavier, Prelude number 1, was one of my sons, Spencer Whitcomb. I didn't want to announce it beforehand because it might make him nervous. No, at any rate, he was nice enough to record that. He and I have fun playing that pretty much every chance we get. I hope you enjoyed it. And as a matter of fact, I hope you enjoyed the whole concert. Thank you.